quite recently, as in my last video, I've been inspired to do some Blood Angels. I've kind of fallen in love with the red Space Marines. I'm not usually a fan of red at all. I've never liked painting it traditionally. I played around with some paints that I have never used before, but they've been sitting on my racks for years at this point, and it came out to be a really, really striking, really beautiful tone of red in my opinion. So that kind of spurred me on to paint more. Now I do like the new sculpts of the Blood Angels, the Sanguinary Guard, you know, all the characters, but I feel like a lot of them are missing something. I mean, a lot of people feel like they're missing something, you know, case in point, the Sanguinary Guard not having wings. So going into that, and the idea for this army is to be small, elite, and individual, you know, mostly jump units, very angelic. Most of them will be winged, or, you know, everything will be converted or customized in some regard. I decided that I would create my own captain. So to do this, I took parts from the Scourge wings, as well as the old conversion or customization Blood Angel sprue, and decided to convert him. Now, unfortunately, all of the footage from that was pretty much corrupted. So I'm going to show you how I put the wings on Dante, who I'm currently painting right now, although I've kind of hit a bit of a roadblock with this guy because it's a lot of non-metallic metal, and I'm deciding to do all of the metallics in this army as non-metallic. But using Scourge wings, I've converted him in the same way that I converted the captain. I think I'm going to do all of the characters that way, and then maybe find a different solution for the Sanguinary Guard. Maybe do them the same, I'm not sure yet. But yeah, essentially all I did for the captain was a head swap, very simple. A chest swap, less simple because it is actually old Marine size. So I had to chop away a lot of the pieces and then fill the inside and pad it out with milliput, and then just kind of sand it down. A lot of it was hidden around the kind of oblique section and the back of his torso, which is where it was the messiest. So I got away pretty lucky there. But then I liked the weapons. The pose was quite dynamic. So I was happy enough to keep pretty much the rest of it, because this was more just the first test piece of whether I was actually going to like working on this project or not. So I don't want to cover actually painting the model so much like the red, because I did in the previous video. Although I will elaborate some things that I kind of forgot to mention because I'm an idiot. The purple was Vallejo model color royal purple, then Liquitex white ink over the top of that, and then the specific red ink, because I just said Liquitex red ink. I didn't realize that Liquitex make like 5 red inks, so I do apologize for that, but it is Naphthol red light. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Then with Vallejo violet ink sprayed underneath, that was the airbrushing done. I gloss varnish it with Liquitex gloss varnish just through an airbrush, and that's to break the surface tension and basically make it slippery and help the oil paint that's going over the top of this do its job better. I'm just using straight black oil from Abteilung 502 mixed with their fast dry thinner, and I'm just dropping that, as you can see, into all of the recesses, and then with a little makeup sponge, which is my favorite way of doing this. You can use Q-tips, but I find sometimes it leaves fibers behind, which, since the next step is to use AK Interactive's Ultramatte Violet, I don't like the chance of having fibers there, because if I spray that, that's going to lock them in and I'm going to be upset. So I use that little makeup sponge just with a little bit of the thinner, just to clean up any of the areas where the oil has bled too much or I've just made any mistakes. This was another thing that somehow I forgot to mention in my previous video, but to edge highlight the armor, it was quite simple. I used Games Workshop Wild Rider Red on the darker areas, so kind of where that purple ink has blocked in more of the shadow. And then as the armor gets brighter, I'm just adding slightly more and more ice yellow to that red. Now to add some more detail to the model, I blacked him out just for kind of, you know, the purposes of breaking up the armor, showing how it looks, as well as like an Instagram clip. But I wanted to keep a lot of these elements still warm. So I'm using a warm gray mixed with black to base coat some of the iconography. And then I'm just adding more and more of that gray. I think it's stone gray from Vallejo, to just layer. I'm not actually blending any of these to get brighter and brighter. Then for the inner ribbing of the armor, I'm using a cold gray, so as it kind of separates those two elements. This was a little bit sketchy for me. I could have maybe painted this in sub-assemblies, but it still would have left some armor behind, and it would have made the job of converting him much harder. So I masked up all of the armor so as I could get a smooth base coat down on his cloak, and using Baneblade Brown and then just mixing some Bone White in to do a highlight layer, I airbrushed his cloak. Then I just took straight white and a small brush and just added some kind of crossed etching texture over the top of the raised areas. The next thing I picked out was the skulls. So for these, I wanted to keep them warm-ish, but kind of shift them away from red or kind of brown. So I actually mixed some Vallejo green gray in with some black, just slowly lowering the amount of black, raising the amount of green gray, and just using some very scratchy, kind of almost stippling with a thin brush. Brought it up to that green gray, then added more and more white, so as it was brighten it as well as desaturate it without making it warm like a ice yellow or off-white would do, and then brought it up to that color. Now I just went around and painted some of the little bits of rope around him. But this was super simple. I base coated it with charred brown, used, Games Workshop Rhinox hide or any rich brown. Then moved on to Baneblade Brown and just kind of blocked in little sections. And then within those little sections, adding more and more white, just kind of added smaller little textured lines. This was the part of the model that I was both the most excited about as well as dreading the most. It's the part of the model that took me the longest and almost made me not want to paint this again, and it's another reason why I'm kind of dreading painting this guy. So this is the wings. After a couple of base coats of Baneblade Brown, then moving up to kind of a 50-50 of Baneblade Brown mixed with some off-white, I just kind of, while leaving a line in the deeper recess of the brown, added some just scratchy layers. And I'm going to continue doing this over multiple brighter steps, with each step getting slightly more targeted and intricate. So I think I did this a total of 5 times until I was pretty much highlighting with pure white, and very much intending to have like individual, very prominently visible veins in the feathers. So this took a long time. I'm not used to this kind of freehand often. Honestly, my wrists were kind of like locking up and I was in weird positions. You can see here the way I'm bracing my wrists against the table, bracing a finger against my hand and holding the brush in a weird way just to consistently pull down and do line on line on line on line on line. Maybe I'm being a bit over dramatic, but this was like torture to me. This is something that I want to get better at because frankly, I haven't been happy with my painting of late, and I'm really excited about just putting in more effort and making models look better as opposed to making them look good, but not great. So this kind of stuff is insanely rewarding, but extremely monotonous and torturous. But honestly, like having it done and being able to look at him now and know that he'll be there forever, I'm glad that I'm kind of shifting towards painting this way as opposed to what I could have just done, which is a couple of airbrush layers, some oils, and a dry brush or whatever. Keeping on with the theme of trying new things. Now, I didn't create this. The person that I copied it from didn't create this, but I saw this on Instagram and they probably got the idea from a girlfriend that maybe does this often, but obviously girls that have been doing their nails do this all the time. But a lot of us guys have no idea about this, which I kind of find hilarious because it's such a simple little trick. This is called nail stamping. So this little piece of metal, the bright parts are laser etched in, and you can get these on Amazon super cheap with all sorts of patterns. So the idea is you put some paint on it, you scrape off the excess, it leaves just the paint in the little indentation, and then using a little silicone stamp, you transfer that onto the stamp. and then you can stamp that onto your nails, or now our miniatures. So I wanted to give this a go to put an intricate little pattern onto his cloak. I learned some things with this. Chiefly that, one, I didn't like this first attempt at it. I went with too dark of a color on the little cloak. Also, a cloak like this is not a good place to do this, because the flowy nature of it kind of means that I can only put the pattern onto the raised part, as opposed to missing out all of the interior parts, so it kind of looks a little bit jank. Also, I would, instead of using normal acrylic paints, I would use oil paints, because then any mistakes I can just easily clean up. But having done that, you know, I think it was good enough to leave. I then just worked up all of the little other details. So I did his base, I did all of the non-metallic metals in the same fashion. So I'm not going to show them now because kind of foreshadowing, but using a series of warm browns. I did his flamer pistol, cold grays, I did all of the, you know, steels, and then gold metallic metal is gold metallic metal. I did his little purity seals and whatever little knickknacks I could find. At this point in the model, I was quite happy with it, but I was actually spurred on to finish painting this model because a little local painting competition had popped up, and I figured, I mean, like, it's not a competition paint job. That was never the intention of it. It was just kind of a, you know, higher level gaming piece. But I figured, you know, I'll drop it off and, you know, be able to check out a whole bunch of other painted minis and just kind of become more of a part of the local community, I guess, because I've been very much a hermit since I've stopped playing games altogether. Not going into this with the intention of winning anything at all, and not expecting anything, and obviously not winning anything, I figured, well, I'll get some feedback, and there were a few things that I hadn't even considered. First of all, I know the base was very average. It's a gaming base, but I have changed it now to something I like a bit more, because frankly, I wasn't happy with it to begin with. The wings were a very easy change to make. I hadn't even thought about it, but the tone across the wings is completely uniform the entire way. And obviously the wings have a flow to them, so there would be lighting and shadow across them. So I did glaze some dark browns into the more sunken in parts of the wings to create a little bit of a transition of light. But namely was the face. Now, while the red is very bright and striking across the model, it is kind of very samey and flat. And the face being one of those parts of the model that you do really want to stand out, the face kind of sunk into the rest of the model, and I hadn't thought about it much. I knew I wasn't happy with the face and I didn't actually like it that much, but I just hadn't put much thought into why, and that's definitely why. So I figured I'll change the face and make it really pop with some non-metallic metal. So I was able to do that in just about 10 minutes with the technique that I use for non-metallic metal. So that is basically, for me in this instance, I started out with Vallejo Game Color Charred Brown, and then slowly adding more and more Vallejo Model Color Golden Yellow into the mixture. Probably through about 5 layers from brown to straight yellow. I just kind of stipple at areas where I think will catch light. And as the paint gets brighter, that area is slowly reduced. Then I go from the yellow to bone white with the same technique, just shrinking in that area. So the transition is basically from brown to bone white through yellow. And then in the highest areas, like, you know, the top of his dome, I'll just add like a little tiny minute dot of pure white. And I basically do the exact same thing for the other non-metallic metals. So the steel is black to white with a cold gray in between. And the kind of brass on the pistol is that same charred brown up to kind of a bone white, but through a series of just warm reds. And you can create a whole heap of metallic or reflective surfaces with this same technique. So in saying that, I know the Assault Marine was the first model that I actually painted for this army, but I'm calling this captain the first finished model in my army, the first real model in my army, because it's kind of what I'm going to use to set the tone for, you know, converting theme, paint job, all of that kind of thing for this little project to go forward. I guess you could call it more of a display army. It's obviously, none of them are like competition standard or anything crazy, but I definitely put more effort into the theming and paint job of this model than I do for most of the stuff that I work on. And this has really invigorated me. I went and painted another Tau Commander in the same OG scheme that I did in a previous video, but I put significantly more effort into this one, and I think it really, really shows. And I'm just having a lot of fun actually caring about my painting more and just putting effort in. So yeah, it's kind of exciting. But anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling about all of that kind of boring stuff. I hope you guys were able to get something out of this video. If you want to help me in making these videos, I do have a Patreon, or you can join the channel as a supporter. I do, in the bottom of that cabinet there, I have a Warhound Titan that I'm actually working on at the moment for the Patreon guys, so that I'm going to be giving that away to one of them, which is super cool. If you don't want to do that, that's super cool. It's YouTube. Just like and subscribe if you got something out and you want to see more. But other than that, I will see you guys in the next one.